The link to this page is in the description below. So in this program, you can have a number of customers which can be added and stored in a database. Each room has a calendar that you can book up to some days in advance. So normally if you go on any website, right, for a hotel, and if you try and make a booking, you can only do it up till a certain time ahead. You can cancel or modify a reservation. That's a very common feature. You can get a refund as well. That's very important. The customer has an invoice, which is the bill essentially. It has to be printed out when the reservation is complete. The program also tells you, the user, which rooms are available on the dates, because let's say if a room is sold out, it should not be shown. So we do have limitations as well, because no program is perfect. It can be made way more complex. There's only one hotel for now. If the user inputs incorrect values, unfortunately, it's not a loop. You have to reinitialize the function again. But to avoid this from happening, the program has prompts all the time. So it tells you what to input. It tells you the correct rooms, for example. There's no housekeeping or receptionist for now. The room suite has a fixed price, so it'll be standard, deluxe, or executive. And if two customers have the same ID, you will have conflicts, but this is not looked at now because it does look at the phone number, and most people don't have the same last 4 digits of their phone number, right? It's super uncommon, along with their same first name and last name initials. We have 5 edge cases: sold out hotel, incorrect ID, overlapping of dates, the dates falling outside the limits, and double booking as well. So we have here the time complexity. This one I've not covered before because I'm not a software engineer. I'm more of a mechanical engineer, but I am getting into software now, so I do have to learn this as well myself in more detail. It's something that is very fundamental in computer science. So it's essentially it's a function of the number of rooms, the number of days per room. So for this method here, one of the methods in my program, it's n rooms because it has to search an array. In this one here, it's called twice and twice more. So it'll be 2n plus 2n times the days here, because it has to check a number of things, like for example, if the dates are within the range, if the customer ID is booked or it's none, because it has to check each day at once. And lastly, we have book customer. So this one here, it has to check that the ID is none before making a booking, right? Because if somebody else is booked there, you will have a conflict and you can't book. So the flag tells the user what the status is. So let's now look at the class diagram here. So the first one is called reservation. This one is the top level class. It inherits customer, hotel, and a room. So essentially you have these variables as the attributes, and you have the methods here like add customer, make reservation, cancel it, return it, the details, modify reservation, and then get the current customer as well. Let's look at the customer class. You have the common details that any reservation will use: the first name, last name, number of guests, the number, phone number here, room assignment, the total charge, how much you have to pay, the check-in and out dates, the invoice, which is an invoice class, which is the bill essentially, the duration of days, and the reservation ID as well. And it has all these methods. Most of them are to return details, because it's always good to use a return method instead of accessing the class attribute directly, because it's just more professional, and at companies, so this is what they do. I have friends who work in software who tell me this. So next we have the hotel class. This one has the number of standard rooms, the number of deluxe rooms, the number of executive rooms, the total number of rooms, a room database, and a bunch of methods like the display rooms of type, so SD or E, check if hotel is booked, check-in date, check-out date, find a specific room, return rooms data, so return the room database, and return the name of the hotel. We have room here. So room has suite type, status, room calendar, reservation flag, booking flag, range start, range end. This is for the customer booking dates, and you have the methods to give back things along with the booking of the customer, the cancellation of the reservation, and checking the dates. And lastly, you have a calendar class. This one uses the Python methods for calendar, which I will show you soon. Moving on, we can now look at the activity diagrams. So to make a reservation, you can show the valid date range for bookings. This one is activated immediately, so the customer can see what dates they can book at. We add a customer, and for each customer, you can check if it exists in the database or not. If it does, you make a reservation, but if it's not, it'll be added to it. So quite straightforward there. When you activate a reservation, you can use the ID and the dates of their booking. If the ID exists, it'll assign check-in and check-out dates, but if not, it'll give you an error and you have to restart. You check if the hotel is sold out. If it is, it'll give you a message and you stop there because you can't do anything else. But if it is not sold out, you can show the available rooms for the dates. You pick a room. You check if the dates are valid next. So if it is not, then you will get this date error and you have to start again. However, the program shows the valid date range, right? So the chances of this occurring are none. If it is valid, you book the customer. And then you can check if the room is empty or not in this booking function here. So once again, the customers can see what's available, right? So if they pick a correct room, then it'll be all fine. And the room will be empty, and then it'll allow them to book it very easily, and then you can book and print the invoice. To modify a reservation, you activate the modification command with the ID and the dates if the ID exists. So the logic is the same as making a reservation because the same method is called. So we showed the booking data in case of failure. Now why I show this is because let's say if you modify a reservation, but if you cannot because the dates are conflicting or if somebody else is booked in, for example, you can revert back to your original booking, right? Because that's a very important feature. Let's say you booked like 10 rooms and you want to modify something, but you can't, and it deletes everything you had before. What's the point? So you have to do it this way here. And I did it such a way that the entirety of the calendar is looked at once. So to avoid conflicts and to do it the most clean way possible, you have to kind of cancel the reservation and then re-add the customer with the old data, except the rooms and the dates, okay? And then you activate the reservation with the new dates. So that's what modification essentially does here. So if any room is available for the new dates, you can make a new reservation. So then you just jump to there. But if not, in this case, you cannot modify your reservation. You just activate the reservation with the old dates, and then you can select the old room which you had before, and then that's done. So I hope you understood this here. It's a bit complex, but you're simply doing 2 steps back just to avoid any edge cases here. So you just have to avoid conflicts, right? Lastly, you can cancel the reservation there. So this one is quite simple. You use the ID and you activate the cancellation command. Same to check the ID here. If a room exists, you can remove the booking, refund, and then delete the customer from the database. So this is how it normally works. In most systems, if you cancel something, it's gone and you have to start again. Let's now continue with the class and the code description. So initially you have the enumerations for the room reservation status and the room type. Next you have the invoice here. So the customer receives an invoice that is initialized at a specific time, which is the date, and the print bill. So it just prints out the bill with all the details of the hotel name, the creation time, the customer name, number of guests, phone, and so on until the amount due, and just all passed in like this. Next you have the hotel class. This one here is a bit complex because it takes in a bunch of other classes like the room. So initially you have the hotel initialization, so you have to pass in the number of rooms for standard, deluxe, and executive, and then it'll just make them into integers here. I also have fail cases in case the customer inputs an invalid data type. I get the total number of rooms and I make a hash table that contains the rooms with the ID. So essentially I just append them. I have to make an instance of room for each type and append it to this rooms data hash table. I do it for standard, for deluxe, and for executive as well. So you just simply do it this way because you have to make a number of instances of room, right? Because each hotel has a number of rooms in it. Next, you can display the rooms of type. This just tells you the rooms which are there for standard and so on. So I just print them out here to the screen. This one checks if the hotel is booked, so it'll just check in. So you just pass in the check-in date, the checkout date, and it'll scan the room to see if the status is available or reserved. And if it is reserved, it'll just add on 1 to this num-booked variable here. If the number is booked and if it equals the total number of rooms, in that case the hotel is sold out, right? So it'll be fully booked here. But if it is not, then it'll be 0. So it'll return a 0. So this is a boolean there. This one here is finding a specific room. Essentially, I just pass in the room and I get its index within the hash table array, and then I get the room instance itself and I return the room instance, because with the room instance I can then assign the calendar and do more things with it. And these are my 2 return methods for the data and the name. So for the customer class, I just have initialization for first name, last name, number of guests, and number. Just put them into this correct data type here. I don't have any values for a bunch of attributes at the start, so I just assign none and 0 to them. For the invoice, I call in the invoice instance, so I have to import that from here. I make my reservation ID from the first name, the last name, and the last 4 digits of the number. So next I can then assign the customer dates for the checkout date and the check-in date. Just make them into a datetime format like this. So from the datetime class, this is a Python built-in class. So then you can assign the customer room here. I can reset my customer data like this. I can charge the customer and refund the same way. And then I can just return a bunch of attributes if I need them, which I will anyway. For the room calendar, I have my calendar. So this is the number of dates initialized. And then I can just assign the booking date, so start date and the end date. So I can just have the datetime class here. So you just get today's date at the start and then get the dates ahead for the number of dates with this feature here. And then I can return them. So for my room class, I initially just have the room suite, the reservation status, which is imported from the enumeration, the room calendar, which is instantiated with the number of days n, no reservation flag, range start and the end dates are none at the start, and the booking flag. So based on the suite, I get the room price to see if it matches standard, deluxe, or executive. I return my room calendar and the calendar range via these methods here. I then return my room price. I can book a customer to check from the start date to the end date. Just assign the calendar list to ID, which is the customer ID. I then have a method to check my reservation dates. This method is very important. Now in this one here, I get the room calendar dates and I just check if the check-in date and the checkout date falls within that range. Only if they both fall, I can then proceed with the booking. But if this is not the case, which is this if statement here, then it'll say dates are out of range or invalid. So please keep these in mind. Both of them have to fall within the range, not just either or. So if they both are good, then you can proceed by getting the list for those specific days. So I skip the second search method. I speed up the code by doing it this way. So from the start to the end, I just extract those array elements. I check if they are all equal to none. So they have to be none because nobody has to be already assigned to that room. Only then you can make a reservation. If that's the case, it'll be true. But if somebody's assigned there, it'll be false. And I can return this flag to the hotel method. So because this is very important, since the reservation will check this, it'll call this method. So I need to see if the method is good or not good. I then have a last method here to cancel booking by ID. So if it is equal to ID, I'll just assign none to that calendar list. And that's it. So you saw how I did the initialization at the start here, because each room has a calendar. So that is why calendar has to be initialized inside the room. So lastly, we can have the reservation class. This one is very important. It imports hotel, which imports a room and the customer too. I have this attributes to get my year, month and the day. This one is from the Python module built in. I initialize the number of standard rooms, number of deluxe and number of executive rooms. I have my hotel which has this. I have my hotel customer data, which is the ID and the customers which are just there. So initially all these variables which should check if the reservation is good or not are all false, right? Because it's at the start and they will be modified after. Initially I print out the booking dates which are legit for the calendar. So I just print out the start date and the end date because the customer has to see what dates they can book up to. So let's say if they book 4 months ahead, they have to be able to see the last possible date they can make a reservation at. I can then add a customer with the first name, last name, phone number and number of guests and make an ID as well and append that to the customer's hash table which is up there. So this one here is the most important method. It is to make a reservation. So I just call the ID, the check-in date and the checkout date. And initially I need to reset the booking flag every time because this can be called a number of times. First thing I do is I get the customer. So this method is at the bottom. It'll just give the index of the customer that is within the hash table. And if it is not there, it'll just say the customer is not in the database. It checks by the ID. So it can return false or, true. So if you don't have any customer, it'll just say invalid ID here. But if we do, we can proceed. You get the dates. You assign them and you get them back. You check if the hotel is booked. And if it is booked, then you have to say that it's sold out, which is this else here. And I also get the rooms available. If there are no rooms, then you can proceed with the booking. So you just input a room which you want to select here. And then I can just say assign that to the active room, which is the room which is being seen now. This flag checks the dates and only if the flag is good. So if the dates are legit, then you can proceed with the booking. So it'll just book the customer, assign the customer room, find the amount, the fees, and then charge the customer and then get the ID. And that's it. But if this flag is a false, in which case it is be unsuccessful. So it'll just give you an error message there and it'll not do it there. So that's it. To cancel the reservation, you just get the rooms and you can just say if there is a room assigned, so in this case this will be good, you can just cancel booking by ID and then refund the customer like this and then reset the customer data. And lastly, remove the customer instance from this hash table up there. This method here gets the reservation details. So this one just simply gets the customer ID, name and then last name and everything, the charge, the rooms, the dates, these here, and then just prints out the invoice. To modify a reservation, this one is a little bit interesting. What I did was I stored the old customer data in case if it is not successful. But if you can modify the dates, then I just cancel and re-add the customer and then remake the reservation. So you essentially just add the customer without the room, just the name and the number of guests and all that stuff, and then make a new reservation there with the new dates that the customer has picked. But if you cannot modify the reservation, I essentially just get the old dates again which worked before, and then I remake the reservation, but this time with the old dates, right? Because since I'm canceling it there, it'll then again re-add it with the old dates. So it should be good then. And I do cover this in my test cases, so you can take a look there. If you wish to test out this code for yourself, you can take a look at the test cases which are in the file, and you can use any one of them as a benchmark to make your own reservation for your own hotel. This project was obtained from this GitHub list, which I will put in the description below. It is a list of many side projects that you can do which relate to multiple topics in computer science. I thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.